So in Act One, Scene Two, we pick back up, but we have changed scenes, obviously. So do remember that a change in scene means we literally change the setting. So in Scene One, we were on a street in Venice. In Scene Two, we're basically where Othello was hanging out. I would call this maybe like his office, like a war office. I don't know. There's probably like some training grounds there and things. It's not Othello's house, but it's a place where Othello is. And we open again in the middle of a conversation. So this is Iago and Othello. So remember, Iago left the scene of where he caused all this trouble, and now he comes back to Othello, and he is talking to Othello about the conversation he heard, like talking about Brabantio, talking about how people are angry with Othello and trying to seem like he's on Othello's side, and like saying, "Oh, beware! These people are coming for you. Watch out! I want to protect you." And so we start off with some irony here, some verbal irony, which might be a good thing for you to mark in your annotations. Um, so Iago starts out and saying, I was hearing these people talk about you, and I wish I could have stabbed him." When he says, "I thought to have yerked him here under the ribs." That's what he wanted to do. But he says in this line, "I lack iniquity sometimes to do me service." So he's saying, "Man, I really wanted to stab him, but I'm too good of a person. Man, if I weren't such a good person, then I'd be able to do a lot more things that I want to do." Um, Again, obviously ironic because he's the one who caused Brabantio to say these things. And he goes on and goes on about this. And Othello, here's our where we first see Othello talk. And basically, what I want to point out here is that Othello is acting kind of the opposite of all the stereotypes we learned about in the background. Like Othello, while the stereotypes for someone who was from the climate he was from, going back to climate theory, someone who is in this hot climate should be passionate, should be violent. Um, but Othello reacts very calmly to this news. He says, "Let him do his spite," and he talks about how Othello is confident in who he is and what he's done. And he says, "My services I have done shall outtongue his complaints." So everything he's done for the people of Venice, he knows that he's done so much that it doesn't matter what Brabantio says, he's still going to be okay. Like he knows who he is. He says he comes from men of royal siege where he's from, and that he's just confident. He knows he's done this for the right reason, and he really believes Othello believes that um, since his life has been exemplary, since he's lived his life and done everything right, that only right can come to him. So that's his beliefs here. So he's not worried about it. Um, Another interesting thing. So they hear people coming, so they think it's Brabantio and everyone coming to see him. But really, it's not. It's Cassio. One thing I want to mention is that Iago, in this kind of throwaway line that doesn't seem very important, he says, "By Janus, I think no," when asking if it's Brabantio, and Iago says, "By Janus, I think no." Janus is this two-faced god. Let me bring up an image of Janus real quick so that you can see right here. So images. So you can see this. There's no reason to put this, basically he's saying like by God or whatever, but he says by Janus. An indication that an illusion that Othello was putting in here, that Shakespeare is putting in here, that Iago is two faced. So interesting little tidbit. And here's, I would say, these lines. I'll highlight these kind of emphasize the point I was making earlier about Othello. "My parts, my title, my perfect soul shall manifest me rightly." So he's saying everything about me is right. I must be found. Let him come. I know I'm good. So really, it's not Brabantio. Shakespeare does this a lot. Like it leads you to expect one thing, then something else happens. Everything's kind of converging. So really, it's Cassio who comes in, and Cassio has some news that the Duke wants to meet with Othello. So it's kind of an urgent matter. So Othello goes to get ready, and goes to go with Cassio to see the Duke. At this time, the Duke is like completely in charge. This is back when Italy was in city states. And so, like, there's no one really higher than the Duke. Like, the Duke is ultimate authority here. So, Othello needs to report to the Duke. We get kind of a little throwaway line at the end here, where Cassio and Iago are talking. I feel like here Iago is kind of trying to feel out Cassio, and see kind of what Cassio's like. I mean, they know each other, but like, um, kind of see where Cassio stands on things, because he kind of starts joking with Cassio about Othello's marriage, when he says, "Tonight Othello has boarded a land carrack. If it prove a lawful prize, he's made forever." So kind of joking about, oh, he's got a good woman, and Cassio doesn't really understand what he's talking about. And then we have this little pun. He's married to who? Married to, and then he stops when Othello starts coming in. So he kind of doesn't want to be caught talking about this marriage. So anyway, so as they're about to go to see the Duke, then the original troop that we thought was going to come see him. So Brabantio and Rodrigo, they all come in, to confront Othello about stealing away Desdemona. So when Brabantio and Rodrigo come, they immediately draw their swords. So they draw their swords on Othello. And Othello, again, defying stereotypes, like, this is a if it's time to act, like, it's time to fight. I mean, when a sword gets drawn on you, that's probably it, right? But Othello says, "Keep up your bright swords, for the dew will rust them. You will more command with years than your weapons." So he says, "Let's put up our swords. We don't need to fight. Senor," talking about Brabantio, "you can tell me what to do just because you're a senator, and older than me and command respect. You don't need to fight me." And Brabantio then starts his accusations. And we see a lot of information in these accusations. So obviously, he calls Othello a foul thief. And then he uses some religious language to attack Othello. He says, "Damned as thou art." And he's using damned in the literal sense there, like you're going to hell kind of thing. Not for this act, but like your soul, like you're just a creature who is damned kind of thing. You've enchanted her, you've used chains of magic. So he thinks that his daughter is so perfect that she could never go with Othello just because she wanted to. Like, he must have used magic to get her. And I'm saying this has to do with religion because, as we talked about in the background information, um, they at this time they definitely saw people from where Othello was from as kind of a religious other, as people who practice this dark religion. And so I don't think that Brabantio would be making these accusations if it weren't for Othello's race. Like, if some white man had run off with Desdemona, he would not accuse them of magic because it just seemed more likely to them that someone who was from Othello's region would use magic. And so that relates to that background knowledge. But then also we have this background knowledge about women when we talked about women's roles. So um, he says that Desdemona was so tender, fair, and happy, so opposite to marriage. And that's what a woman was supposed to be. I think I told you that. Like, a woman was supposed to not want marriage, not want men at all. Even her husband, who she was supposed to eventually, serve and like be obedient to and be chaste, until marriage. She wasn't really supposed to want even her husband because, like, wanting anything at all, romantically, sexually, was supposed to be a sign that you were corrupt if you're a woman. Women weren't supposed to have these desires. And Desdemona is the perfect woman. So he says she's opposite to marriage. She shunned the wealthy, curled darlings of our nation. So even these men she was supposed to want, as far as like what she would naturally want, and definitely natural being this racist biological idea. Um, yeah, so she didn't want that. So how could she run to the sooty bosom of a thing as thou? So we're seeing again, this talking about his race, that the reason she must have been enchanted is because she would never run off with someone of his race. Um, so he wants to, Brabantio wants to take Othello and arrest him, send him to prison until they can resolve this. But Othello's like, look, the Duke wants me, so we're gonna have to go to the Duke. So they all decide, all right, fine, we're all gonna go see the Duke, and let him kind of figure all this out. And that is the end of scene two.